Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week as we always do with a special selection. No, an album reaction, album review. We're going to go through an entire album track by track, exploring each track in isolation and it's part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be looking at the group Gorycz. It's a Polish band. I'm going to assume they have a Polish name. It means bitterness in English. The album we're looking at is the 2025 Zasypia, which translates to falls asleep. Now, I'm going to be totally honest. This album cover doesn't tell me metal. But as a bit of a running joke on the channel, I don't think y'all have steered me towards Polish music that wasn't metal yet. I'm sure it exists out there, but I don't think I've ever been exposed to non-metal Polish music. So I'm assuming this is going to be metal of some sort. But this is just not the album cover I would expect for a metal album. So I don't know, maybe it's going to be folk. Let's find out. We're going to dive into this first track. I forgot to look up not translations, well that too, but pronunciations for these titles. So I will pronounce this title correctly later after I've heard the word. We're going to check this one out. I am noticing this is the longest track on the album, and as we get through it, they get shorter and shorter. We're looking at 54 minutes in total across 10 tracks. We front load with 7, 5, 6-minute songs all the way up to the halfway point, and the last few tracks are 3 and 4 minutes each. So I think this is going to be a bit front heavy, and the album's going to feel like we're just moving through at a blistering pace as we get further into it. So let's dive into this and see what Gorycz is bringing to the table today. Oh, this translates to loves, by the way. I do have hand translated lyrics. And I just noticed that they also have the titles translated, but I don't know the pronunciation yet. I mean, there's quite a bit of bite to the guitar. Kind of playing around with the blues scale, dancing in and out of it. It's getting heavy though. It's starting off light, but it's getting heavy. Kind of an odd 3/4 rhythmic, melodically, the phrasing of it. Got that snare in the back. The bass just chugging back there with the snare. Ooh. That's tense, that's dark. A nice groove to this. The playful syncopation on the drums. Nice ghost notes. It's depressingly oppressive. I think that's my understanding of it so far. It's interesting, there's almost a levity to the guitar sounds. It soars above everything else despite bringing crushing weight through the composition. Like, that is not a joyful guitar riff. Like a muted triangle. Very interesting. Once again, really good ghost note inclusion in the drum pattern. I like how that idea was based off of the more minimal bomb, those big sounds coming into this, and then they just add those bottom, the like lead-in notes into the big ones. Like something on the periphery, or present actually, closing in, some sort of oppressive force. There's these little moments of beauty, not joy, not release, but they are gorgeous. The guitar has these melodies that I think do a great job at introducing something other than weight. And again, to use the word oppression in this track, a lot of this song is designed to create something heavy and large, to push down on the listener. And the guitarist refuses that. Thrice on this song, at least, maybe more. The guitar will break through a heavy moment, play a melody, and the atmosphere will dissolve a little bit. As if the lullaby can stop this creature for a moment. The song pretty much always pulls back to that massive sound some way, somehow. We layer back up into it. The monster doesn't rest forever. But it is a moment of release. Not joy, not victory, nothing positive, but just nothing negative either. Momentary reprieve from the weight. We do end, though, on a low element, bringing the energy down, just wrapping it up on this melancholic guitar melody. It's a nice roller coaster if you view it through that lens. We start out light, rise into heavy, bring it back down, rise back into heavy, bring it back down, and chill the song out. I actually enjoyed this more than I would expect, and I think that's because I would probably classify this as progressive or maybe even post-black metal. We did have blast beats and growling, screaming, some sort of harsh at the beginning of the track. Sure, there was definitely a black metal, like classic traditional black metal idea somewhere in this track. But most of it seems to be built off of the foundation of black metal, which is strong emotional resonance and atmosphere. I think the heavy use of negativity throughout the song emotionally also kind of ties it to black metal, as we have experienced positive black metal on this channel before, and sometimes I think it's quite effective, but the oppression of, or I should say the oppressiveness of the 16th note attacks that black metal is so well known for very rarely feel positive to me. It is, as I described it, oppressive. It is a lot of sound thrust into the ear at one time. So it never really feels calming or soothing, even if melodically and harmonically they are pushing in that direction. So I see a lot of parallels to black metal in this track without leaning heavily into that traditional 16th note attack. And I think that's where I like my black metal. Not quite as blackened, but definitely dark. And this song, I think, does a great job of walking that line, bringing in the nuance, not just in the composition, but in the production as well, and finding that midpoint, being able to evoke the same emotions and intensities that black metal does a very easy job of, while not quite using the standard language, the traditional language of the genre. And I think looking at how these instruments are played is a really great way to peer into this, a little peek behind the curtain to see why this works. The guitar, we start off with some really nice guitar lines. It has a gnarly tone to it right from the start, even against all of the lighter acoustic instrumentation in the opening. You can tell the song's going in a metal direction. It's like the guitar's got bite, it's got grit, it's got distortion on it. And it is a gnarly distortion right from the start. But you can also hear a melancholy within it too, something that wants for more. I really enjoyed that start. There's a softness, a vulnerability to the opening of the track that it kind of exists on another level to the production of it, which sounds aggressive. I was simultaneously at this point ready for a full-on black metal experience, throw in the blast beats and the 16th note picking and the screaming, and just really hit me over the head with this blunt sound. But it was also soft, sad, open, expressing itself. When I heard this duality, I hoped I was in for a good ride. Subsequently, the section that comes after this is the most metal, and I was like, oh, dang, nope, this is it. Just a black metal album. But as we got after this section, we began to introduce more nuance, going back to this older idea of vulnerability and working that into the bleak atmosphere that the song resides within. The guitar work continues to improve and expand, looking at new melodies to play alongside the more traditional riffs that we hear in some of the sections that are designed mostly to give us harmonic and textural information rather than melodic ones. The bass is present. I mean, that's a step up from a lot of traditional black metal already. I didn't hear a lot of interesting bass work. There's a lot of pedal tone in here, but there were a couple of nice slides and one section that danced around a home tone, focusing on 3 or 4 notes. I kind of hope that these are some foreshadowing to some more interesting bass lines, but I'm also, it's the opening track. I expect to hear something of what the album's going to be exploring here. And I also kind of just expecting more of this kind of bass work on this album, in a place where if I hear more bass work, I'll be excited, but if I don't hear it, I won't be disappointed. I'm trying to keep myself in that middle realm. The drum work consistently surprised me though. There's a lot of really fun ghost note ideas in here. There's melodic drum patterns. There's cool syncopation all over the place. The whole kit is used. Open hi-hat in a black metal track is fairly rare, and we got to hear some of that here. Not only just that, but we got to hear a movement from open to close, the muted shimmering that you get from hitting a closed hi-hat and then opening while those vibrations are still present in the top cymbal. Yeah, that's just not commonly used in black metal, so that was pretty cool to hear it here. That mixed with some of the syncopation in the cymbal work gives the song, I wouldn't call it a bounciness, but an illusion of optimism. I'm not thinking the lyrics are going to be incredibly optimistic given how moody this entire track was atmospherically, but I would not be surprised if the themes of hope popped up somewhere on this album, simply because the drum work here already creates this feeling of levity against a song that has so much weight pushing down upon it. Usually with black metal, what I find is a uniformity of theme. Everything is oppressive. This is the blast beats plus the 16th note picking plus the gnarly screams all mixed together. Not one of these ideas is palatable in any way. A lot of black metal that I've been introduced to, especially on the more extreme side of that, it's basically the opposite of palatability. It's stuff that is, quite frankly, an acquired taste, one of the most acquired tastes, where you really have to earn your way into enjoying it. It wouldn't surprise me if some people out there just woke up one day and loved black metal and dove right into the deep end, but I would wager that for a vast majority of people, it was a slow process getting towards that sound. Even if you weren't intentionally aiming for it, you just enjoyed a sound and wanted something heavier, and then wanted something heavier, and then slowly you find your way into black metal. You build up the resistance over time. It's not a sound a lot of people can dive straight into. And it's because of this uniformity of oppression, of negativity, of aggression. And for this song, for me to say, hey, we have some bells over here doing something a little different. We have the guitar bringing the energy down and exploring melodic devices that aren't necessarily just dreary. We have a drum part that's kind of introducing some offbeat elements that induce hope into the listener. Yeah, this is nuanced. I enjoy that. It pairs really well with the idea of contrast and dynamics that I love. And it's very cool to see all of this come together in a form that, again, I'm stereotyping really hard here because black metal had a sound at a particular point in its evolution that's really kind of stuck out as a big moment for the genre. I know black metal is rather diverse, but I also predominantly have heard kind of one type of black metal a lot. And so I just really enjoy seeing this used as a foundation to explore other ideas, more dynamic, contrasty, vulnerable, varying emotions. Yeah, this is a solid start to an album. I don't know if it's something that's going to click with me in a way that would have, yeah, 2025. That if I had heard this last year would have ended up on one of my album of the year lists. I only had one, but it's certainly better than most black metal I've listened to, and by better, subjectively, of course. Um, talk about the vocals, but well, actually, I will talk about the vocals because there was something cool here too. Yes, we have some gnarly guttural vocals, just a bubbling of spit on top of a raspy growl. Definitely false chord stuff going on here. That's all over the place. That is not my cup of tea. It's too orcish, too goblin-y, not really my type of harsh that I would enjoy listening to, but I think it fits well with the energy. The first time that we dropped the energy down and we did the spoken word, we're going to talk about that in a second, and then we built that up into the growling with the guitars and the drums all rising in intensity to meet the vocalist's energy. I thought that worked incredibly well. I don't think it would have worked as well with a different type of vocal style. I really liked what was going on there. Again, not really from an enjoyment perspective, but artistic, thematic. There's a pain, there's an anguish in here. It's not really a rage so much. And I think a lot of that comes down to, I don't know, I'm going to have to think about this more. Why specific styles of harsh feel different ways to me. Obviously, like something shouty, like what, I don't know, death metal or even hardcore punk might do feels aggressive. It's shouting. But this just, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't feel aggressive. It's not palatable. I don't want that to be confused with my statement, but it doesn't feel aggressive. It doesn't feel like the vocalist is attacking me. It feels like they're bearing their soul. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that we have contrast for this. As I've mentioned many times, if you just give me a harsh all the time, it loses its extremity. It might be extreme in contrast to something else for a single song reaction. I haven't listened to anything else in the day yet. I've just woken up. I've talked to some people. I've heard normal speech. Maybe I heard, some pop singer on the radio when I took my kid to school or something like that. So by contrast, harsh vocals might feel extreme to me at that point, but I'm going to listen to a 50-minute album. At a certain point, the only thing I have to compare it to is the same kind of vocals, and then it becomes the norm. Contrast is what allows highs and lows to retain their feeling of heightened element. And here we have these harshes to contrast with cleans, but not sung cleans. This is spoken word. Something about the way it's spoken feels dreary. There's a lack of energy to it. It isn't a poem being recited full-chested, ready to deliver these words because they stand behind them. It's kind of heavy. A slowness to the cadence and a heavy breath paired with it. This is someone who doesn't need to say these things because they stand behind them or feel their message needs to be stated. They say them because if they don't, then these ideas must be kept inside, and that's more destructive than releasing them. The delivery of the lines create just as much vulnerability in the song and emotional resonance as the atmosphere does from the harmonic work. And to hear the vocalist move from this spoken word into this gnarly, harsh vocal, every single time had impact. Yeah, solid track right here. Kind of small for the size. It's almost 8 minutes long, and I think it took us 2.5 minutes to get through the intro and first section, and then we kicked off another intro. It would not surprise me if this is a verse, chorus song, as that's sort of the musical flow I got from this track. And then we had a bridge, which brought the energy down one more time, a final chorus to ramp it up, or maybe a final verse. I'm not really sure what happened there. And then we brought the energy down for the outro. It's pretty close to a standard structure there. So there's not as much music as I would have expected, being that so much of it is at least based off of what came before it. I'm not going to say it's completely cyclical, as I do find there's linear expansions on previous ideas. There is, I don't know if I would call it, theme and variation, I think, is the best way to describe it, in that we're introduced to an idea and then we grow out of that and we see what we can do with it, such as the case with the bridge, where we had those really big impactful hits that had a lot of space between them, and then we added syncopated rhythms around those key tones, around those key rhythms, in order to create the riff that led us into the outro. It's about creating a foundation and then seeing what you can build out of it. We do end up seeing cyclicality because of that, but we don't see identical cycles. They are repeating concepts or repeating foundations with new ideas built from that. And so it feels both linear and cyclical simultaneously. That's another way that it keeps fresh, stays dynamic, stays fresh, keeps dynamic, whatever. And another thing that I really enjoy about it. Let's hit some lyrics on this one. This is a song about someone feeling incredibly low. Presumably because someone that they loved is no longer in their life, for whatever reason. It starts off with the incredibly romantic, "He breathes in the name of love. It cannot be any quieter or simpler." It is a subtle element of his life, but it is a constant. The foundation, the bedrock to his character. It says, "Now, despair, in the name of conscience, there is nothing deeper." And he contemplates, in the name of hope, that the edge will not dare to end. Standing on the precipice of something, right at the edge, hoping it doesn't crumble beneath his feet. He says that it knocks the blue out of colors and tilts life into grayness, and then falls. Yeah, this is a really good description of the beginning of depression. What once brought you life, was your foundation, was who you were, has now been ripped away from you, and the colors removed from the world, and you just kind of fall into the depression. The track is called Kocha, translates to loves. The next one is called Budgi, which translates to wakes up. So this will be interesting to see if this is some sort of, I was looking at some of these titles, the translations of them. I don't know if it's a concept album in general, but many of the titles do tell some sort of story between them. They're all one-word titles. They're all connected thematically, though, or at least I could see a way to connect them thematically, and I'm curious if they're going to go that direction. Let's check out track 2, Budgi. Just the compression on it, it sounds like it's underwater. the time signature is here. If it's the tempo I'm feeling. Well, this certainly isn't. This is 4/4 though. Oh, it's not. Yeah, so we're working in 7. Okay. So yeah, like a 7/4. Using the subtraction method, we have a 4-beat idea, and then we remove the last beat of it to make the 3-beat, and those are 7. I love the bass lead element in this entire beginning. It is just 2 notes, but it's just brooding. There's something waiting on the other side of this. There's been intensity this entire time, waiting to explode. Just like walking through a cloud. It's so dreary. It should feel like rain, but it doesn't. There is a watery vibe to it though that's still present from that intro. More ghost note work. A really expressive drum too. Wild. Yeah. That time signature at the end was neat. I'm trying to figure out how it relates to the first one. The first time signature was a 7/4. We had an alternating 4-beat phrase and then a 3-beat phrase, which gives us our 7 beats. That's the top number of the time signature. It was based off of subtraction though. This 4 and this 3 had the same general first 3 beats. It's just where the 4 gets to have that final beat for a little bit of rhythmic resolution. The 3 doesn't. And so we're expecting that last beat and we don't get it. We get thrust into the next one. It feels like we're lurching into the next bar. It came too early. What happens? Like missing a step when you're going downstairs. You just kind of you get tripped up a little bit. That's what happens there. It's basically 4/4, but every other bar just had one beat chopped off, but the rest of the riff didn't change to accommodate the less amount of time spent in it. There at the end, though, it's very similar to the rhythmic device that we heard at the beginning in the 7, but we're actually in a 9 here. You may have seen me counting out 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We get 3 of those. So we have a 9-beat phrase, but the thing is that it doesn't tie up into a 9 very neatly. We have a 4 and then a 2 where the last beat is just this, it's just this elevated, suspended sound. You're waiting for that next beat to come in. It just feels like you're suspended in that moment. And then we have an odd 3-beat finale, which much like at the beginning of the track, lurches us back into the repetition of the phrase itself. It is too short for what is being played. It doesn't feel like we get to end the idea naturally. So we basically have the 4 and the 3 like earlier, but we've slotted a 2 in the middle of it for suspension. It's very interesting. It took me way too many times through that phrase to figure out what was going on there. But it is a variation on our opening idea, both metrically and melodically. The riff is the same. I'm curious what that means. Why inject this idea in the middle, which makes it even more jagged than it was? I don't know. I find it to be interesting. It took me a second to grasp, so that's always going to catch my attention. Yeah. Time signatures, man. The rest of this track, though, follows a similar pattern to Kocha, where we have rest and then excitement, and then rest and then excitement. We have a rather heavy, dreary sound overall. We do have a bass-led section throughout a lot of this. The entire intro is bass, and it's just 2 notes. Yep. There's a rhythmic cadence to it. It's got a little bit of groove, some nice syncopation, which works well with the time signatures that it's present in. The second time through, we had a very cool snare idea with the ghost notes on that. That was nice. We had these accents on some cymbals, and it was just a cool little melodic, lower energy drumming concept. I dig the times that the drummer gets to show off a little bit with their, I guess we could call it smoother chops, their ability to write parts that feel like they flow rather than keep time. Which, as I say that, I don't know that makes a lot of sense. You would assume that there is time kept in flow as well, but it feels natural, whereas something like ta ta ka ta 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 ka ta ta has a rigidity to it that feels more mechanical, more metronomic, less fluid. So I enjoy the fact that the drummer can lighten up at times while still get aggressive and more rigid when they need to be, such as the blast beats on the first track. Incredibly rigid idea there that sells that moment compared to the more fluid drumming we hear elsewhere. And I thought this was a cool moment for the drummer to showcase that. That's kind of about it for this track. It was fairly more constrained than the first one. The first one did have rising and falling action, and there was still variations on core ideas, but it felt more expansive, as if we went on a larger journey. This one feels like we're just swinging back and forth between 2 modes. And I think a lot of that comes down to the rhythm. The core riff that we heard at the beginning and a little towards the middle of the end of the middle, and of course the outro, just that dum 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 dum. That rhythm is everywhere, and most instruments are only playing two notes on that, or two different pitches. So it ends up feeling fairly repetitive for me. And since all of the ideas are based off of this, variations of it, of course, at the beginning, we're cutting off one of the beats in the 8-beat phrase. And at the end, we are cutting off a beat at the end, but injecting two beats into the middle. But it's all based off of this core foundation. And so there's a lot of similarity to this track. When we don't have that heavy riff, though, we just have light atmosphere. The guitars are playing chords. We don't really have as much of the cool melodic stuff as we did on the first one. We still have the back and forth on the vocals, moving from the spoken word to the harshes. And I do feel like the first harsh came in incredibly impactful. I wasn't expecting that. To my ears, it sounded a little different of a harsh, but I don't know, it might have just been the sounds around it. The big difference on this one, though, is compression. From the very start, this song feels watery in a way the first one didn't. We kick off the track with a guitar tone that sounds so small and muffled, as if it were being played through or underwater. That feeling of wateriness never leaves. It never quite feels like a downpour or rain, but there is a mistiness to the song. The low energy sections I described as fog. The type of fog that you can kind of feel the water particles in as you walk through it. It's not a dry feeling at all. That's what this track felt like to me anyways. I don't know what that means. I don't know why it feels so watery all the time. It's a damp song. That's not a phrase I use too often. But they nailed that. It's captured in almost every facet, some sort of watery sound, vibe, or characteristic. But it continues to be moody and fairly depressive, melancholic. It's a hazy album so far. I mean, we're 13 minutes into this. What does that put us at? Almost a quarter in. I figure this album's just going to be heavy and moody all the time. Maybe by the end we'll have a change, the penultimate track or maybe the finale, things might, ramp up a little bit. But it is black metal and just kind of sitting within that darkness for an entirety of an album. That's definitely something within the genre's wheelhouse. So let's hit some lyrics on this one. I'm not sure what this track is trying to say. There is the surface level element where it just talks about people waking up, which the title of the song does translate to wakes up. It says day shakes the sleep from eyelids, sets the circulation of blood, the dark pulse is already beating. It then says that red beauty shines to spite the stars. It lights the mute torches of heads against the darkness of meanings. Red lighting of heads against darkness reminds me of matches. I don't know if that's what it's talking about or why it speaks of mute torches, as if any torch could speak, unless it's talking about something more metaphysical. More figurative is the word I wanted there. Later, though, it says that simple people wake up louder and louder near morning. It talks about people waking up and lifting their children. That the air will not stop. Through the clenched teeth and the touch of patient palms, ash will find your wind when the head burns down. I don't know what ash will find your wind means. If we can take wind in a traditional sense of being motivation, the wind in your sails. We have a phrase that when you kind of lose motivation, the wind's been knocked out of your sails. So we can see that as a force that propels you, motivation. Ash will find that. We are talking about a fire here in some sense. We have the torch at the beginning, and this says that this will happen when the head burns down. Once again, bringing in the concept of matches, we have fire. Fire creates ash, but I'm just not. I'm not getting it. The part I skipped in the middle says the human cemetery will forgive the lack of words. I don't know what that means either. I mean, obviously, the very literal suggestion here is the silence that appears at cemeteries, whether it is a lack of people visiting or people visiting solemnly. But what does that have to do with people waking up? Other than that this is a place where people don't wake up, the eternal sleep. There's definitely some metaphorical parallels here. Is it when the head burns down? Is the match your life force? It does speak about waking up, not just as getting out of bed, but the circulation of the blood being set. The pulse is beating. To wake up is to live, and we wake up with the light. Right after we see this, we talk about the mute torches. It says, I think I skipped this line, that the mute torches of heads are lights against the darkness of meaning, which I think is interesting too. Darkness has meaning, but light is only life. I don't know. There might be something lost in translation here that I'm missing. I can kind of see where these parallels are, but I feel like I'm missing the connecting pieces to really form a larger idea. But it is interesting that after the opening track, which seems to be about falling into depression, this one is about waking up, having energy, being alive. It might turn into something a bit darker at the end, as it might be focusing on death. But generally speaking, it just seems to say that people wake up and do things. I don't know. The next track we have is called Tańczy. Interestingly, this is the exact same length as Budzi. Let's see what they're doing here on track 3. Ooh. So we have a 7/8 there. Atmospheric guitar work, pedal tone rhythmic bass, dexterous strumming. I mean, this is how the band operates. It's a solid idea too. Oh, there's that chuck, 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 chuck in the background. That's interesting. The guitar riff changed, but the drum and bass part haven't really. That sound in the background though, I like that. It's a neat texture. Almost sounds like laughter. again, the expansion, the underlying rhythm and groove is still consistent, but we're exploring new atmosphere with this new guitar tone and a new drum part that's more expanded, focusing on cymbals. Also, this open crashes in, we have all this movement, and then the weightlessness. Nice contrast with those two. So we are still in 7, but shifted from 7/8 to 7/4. It almost runs into a similar concept as post-rock of hyper-focusing on one idea and seeing how far you can expand it, fully exploring a single concept. It's almost turning into like an alarm. There's a strong tension to this chord here. Yeah, a fairly straightforward track. I'm going to let this roll over into the next here. 4/4. We haven't really seen that too often here. An interesting start. This feels more in line of their work. A calmness. I like this melody. This part particular. There's a lot of grit in here, a lot of tension in these chords, but then there's this levity. And then tension here again. That leads us into this pure tension. Oh, I thought that was going to go heavier given that vocal delivery being projected. Ooh. Yeah, so we're doing a 7 again, alternating 4 and 3. Once again, using the subtraction method, you get the full idea, and then one beat less of that idea. Okay, there's some core influence here. Also very straightforward. The bass kick is in on the guitar line. It's just this unification. And then this kind of goes back into the atmospheric side of things. They're very neat. Kind of got a little punky there. Snare works great. Okay, so the same rhythmic device, but building something melodic out of it. Okay. I really wanted that to build into something. And then I noticed that, you know, we're at the end of the track here. All right, I don't have a lot to say about track 3. It's fairly straightforward, and I think it takes the concepts that they've been exploring on this track to its inevitable conclusion, which is the entire song is built off of one rhythmic device. We saw that on track 4 as well. And I'm starting to hear this more often here. I don't know if this is just, you know, now that I recognize they're doing it, I'm picking up on it more, or if they really are focusing on this type of compositional style here towards the middle of the album, more so than the beginning, which I still feel like track 1 was the most dynamic to me. It's also the longest though, and that certainly plays into it. Regardless, I mean, these tracks are rather short, 5:18 and 4:20. And you get one rhythm. It embodies the entire track. They will expand away from this and include more syncopation against it, but the core beats that you're getting on these, bum, 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 those core accented elements are going to be present in every single variation or evolution of the song. And I think that these two tracks in particular ventured away from this core less far than tracks 1 and 2 did. They felt like they were a bit more exploratory and finding more diverse variations on this core idea, whereas tracks 3 and 4 really do feel like one concept. It's just one sound. We do raise the intensity. The melody on the guitar might change a little bit, but the bass kick, the bass guitar, they're not changing much at all. The drummer as a whole may end up putting some cymbal in there instead of some snare rolls, but your core pulse, it's not changing. So they are starting to hyper-focus here, and I had mentioned post-rock, and I kind of feel that with some of the post-rock greats where you start with one idea and you build it into something larger. It may even be that you wind up somewhere totally different, but the blueprint is still there. That core that you started with is still present in that finale. It's about taking an entire track to reach a conclusion to a starting idea where everything is connected. And I suppose that's one thing I haven't really touched on, but should, is some praise for their fluidity of ideas. The transitions across this entire album have been incredibly smooth. I think we had one section that came in fairly heavy after a light section in a bit of a jarring transition, but in the context of what I've heard so far, that is an outlier. Almost everything builds off of the bars that precede it. It is music that is designed with evolution in mind rather than static structure. To say this is the verse, it will be different than the chorus, and there will be a very sharp divide. The listener will be able to know when we have left one section and proceeded into another. And that's not quite as apparent here. I think we can tell when songs escalate. And when they diminish, those tend to be fairly rapid movements. In a sense, we could ascribe structure through that lens. But there is still general growth. It's not like we just jump from a 5 to a 10 in intensity. We tend to grow into ideas. There is solid, smooth, we're going to go with that. Smooth movement between concepts. Everything feels like it's in conversation with everything around it. When we get to the end of a track and I can feel the intensity at its peak or the sorrow at its peak, I know how we got there. We arrived there in a very natural way. It makes sense. I'm really appreciating that part of this. There's a high contrast, but that doesn't mean jagged turns. And it's working rather well for me. As I mentioned at the beginning, I still don't think this is going to be an album I personally return to, but I'm enjoying my ride for a single listen on this, and it's working for me. Usually black metal albums are kind of tough to get through. We're coming up on the halfway point, and I'm not really that fatigued yet. So I've been enjoying this. Now, track 4, Pije, this had a really interesting turn in it. We've seen the blackened foundation to a lot of this, and moving away from that, we've retained the atmospheric component of black metal and have explored clean electric and even acoustic explorations of atmosphere, focusing on emotional resonance over pure weight or distortion or even riffage at times. There's a lot of cases in here where instrumentation is rather light in order to create a vibe rather than to have a sick riff that is memorable. That's not to say that there aren't some really cool riffs on here, they're just not the predominant form of guitar writing. But what we haven't seen up to this point is a hyper focus on singularity, and I would even say a harmonic shift slightly into something more post-hardcore. This was a very cool moment in track 4 that pushed a little into the punky side. There's been, even in the heaviest sections of this album, still a division of roles. The bass is going to be playing something a little different than the guitar. It's usually rhythmically in line with the bass kick, but the bass kick isn't necessarily lined up with everything in the drums. There is a vocalist, and sometimes they'll be doing their own thing as well. There is rhythmic, melodic, and harmonic diversity across the instruments to create a full, rich sound. Not true in the middle of track 4, where everybody locked into a single note, a single rhythm. The only thing that really deviated was the cymbal work, which was creating syncopation against this core idea. But the bass kick, the bass guitar, the electric guitar, all in on this one idea. It almost felt like it wanted to become a breakdown eventually. It never quite reached that point, but I think even when the vocals came in on this section, it still retained a bit of that punk heart. And I don't know what it is. I brought this up in previous tracks. When metal brings in punky ideas, I just think it's really cool. Now, part of that might just be my bias. I'm more of a punk than a metalhead. I enjoy post-hardcore. But I think there's another element to this too, where there's just a very different feel to punk concepts, punk ideas that just sound cool within a metal context. Both punk and metal can be heavy in their own ways. To bring that heaviness together, it just works in a way that I don't think is always present even in the mixed genre of metalcore. Metalcore is kind of developed into its own thing. And I think it's interesting here where we kind of get the two ideas brought together more naturally than in what has evolved into sort of its own genre at this point, which has influences in hardcore punk and metal, but not necessarily directly related to them quite so much anymore. This is very clearly taking punk ideas and putting them in a metal context, where you can very clearly put the division where one idea came from one genre and another came from the other. And something about that combination, which honestly, it's not something I'd always want to listen to. It is a bit too rigid of a division between the two concepts, but to put it in the middle of a rather pure metal album so far, it's always going to trip me up and put a smile on my face. I don't know, it's just a cool thing. I would love to hear some punky drum parts come into this too. That's always something that puts a smile on my face in a black metal album as well. Yeah, not much else to say about these two. They're continuing on with what the album's doing and kind of locking into this concept. It's nice we're going to get to the longer tracks again here. We have a 6:43 and a 6:51. That's going to end the long tracks. Then we're going to see how they wind down the album with some of their shortest ones, including a song that it's only 3 minutes and some odd seconds long. All right, lyrics for these two. This track's actually kind of beautiful. The title, Tańczy, translates to dances. And the very first line says, "Hollow out my eyes from seeing Thropio." Thropio refers to the woman who started the dancing plague of 1518. And let me just ask this real quick. Has anybody else found this topic to be increasingly recurrent in their life? I had never heard of the dancing plague of 1518 prior to, let's just say, the turn of the decade. It's definitely more recent memory, but since then, I think it has come up in multiple song lyrics, and I heard about it in a YouTube video as well, some sort of video essay. I feel like this is the 5th time I've heard this topic brought up in the past half decade, maybe. Does anybody else have this problem? Or is this phenomenon just correlated to me? Anyways, he says, you know, let the dancing plague rapture me, and let me hollow out my eyes as I enjoy this. He continues on. He says, let the ego go blind, and then barefoot I will dance myself to death following you. It's the most perfect suicidal thought, to dance as long as you live, and shine as long as you dance. To basically, for the rest of your life, do what makes you happy and be a bright light to those around you. Just to simply smile through the rest of your life. For those who don't know, the dancing plague of 1518 is kind of unexplained the last time I read about it. But apparently people would just go out of their homes and dance in the middle of the town. I believe 1 or 2 people died from this, which is why it became known as a plague. They would just dance to their deaths, completely fatigued, dehydrated. They would not take care of their body at all. They would just dance. And, from that perspective, it's kind of an interesting way to go if you enjoy it. But if you don't enjoy dancing and you approach it from some sort of plague, mind control, parasitic perspective on it, for yourself to exert your body so far to push it past, food needs, nutrients, water, hydration, to just have your muscles screaming, but you can't stop dancing. I mean, that's a terrible way to describe it. But if you look at it from a different perspective, you just enjoyed life until you died, that's a bit more of a romantic view on it, which I think is where this song comes from. And I had mentioned that it is beautiful, and I think it is. There's a motivating factor in here. If you ignore some of the less romantic perspectives on it, the sheer concept of doing what you love and having a smile on your face for every moment that you're alive, that's phenomenal. That's a fantastic message. But there's a possibility that it was some sort of plague. These people were unwilling in their participation of the dancing. That doesn't make it seem as fun. So the lyrics are a bit mixed for me. If I take it from the perspective, the romantic perspective that the narrator does, I enjoy the message. To let go of your ego and simply have a good time with the rest of your life. I can get behind that message. Starting to see a pattern here. Odd number tracks are a bit easier for me to pick up, and even ones aren't. Now, granted, we don't have a very large pool of data to pull this from, but that's how it's been so far, at least on just track 4. This one is, albeit rather empty, vague, scarce. There's 6 whole lines on this. I'm just going to read it completely, and then I guess we'll explain my confusion on it. Scoop me up from the tears, piece by piece, and eat. Pour from anger slowly. Drink when it hurts. Clap along. Clap along with the jester. It is always fitting to be more serious. I have no idea. I mean, obviously we have someone who's not in a great place. They're crying, so scoop up my tears. But there's also this idea of piece by piece, which could mean that there's a lot of tears to scoop up, but it could also imply that our person is broken up into fragments. It says, though, bringing in the concept of nourishment, says to eat and then drink when it hurts. There's a line there, pour from anger slowly. I don't know what we're pouring, presumably this drink that we are going to drink when it hurts, but there's pain even in that. Then it says, clap with the jester. It's always fitting to be more serious. And this is a wild line to continue on from this. Like, I'm not in a great place, but I need to remind myself to take care of my body. And there's a clown nearby, and it's better if I'm just serious. Like, that is not a way to end these thoughts. I don't see how that final line fits into anything there. Unless the jester goes along with the food and the drink. Ignore all of this? Because being serious is, I don't know, dude. I'm grasping at straws here. If anyone's got a read on that one, let me know, because it eludes me. The next track translates to betrays. It is Zdradza, which is crazy hard for me to pronounce because the Z, the D, and then that kind of rolled R sound, my mouth does not want to put those next to each other. But that's what we have right here. Let's dive into this, see what's going on. Ooh. Okay. I like that bass lick. Real eerie coming in on the guitar. Very reverberant, takes up a lot of space. Oh, that subtle ghost snare roll. right here, it bottoms out, and then there's something about this. There's an uncertainty to it. But also like a vibrant beauty too. I think it's probably one of the brightest chords we've heard so far, even if it's unsure of itself. But for it to be wedged in between all this gnarly weight. This is a very cool interpretation of this riff from previous. Bringing in again some of that uncertainty into the equation, but using the key rhythmic elements, the accented notes from the heavy section. See? Same pattern. But they're just not high-pitched and eerie sounding. They're very firm and large and consistent here. So here's a triplet, but there's a light cymbal in the back, giving us a 4/4, which gives us a nice hemiola. Yeah. So we have this 4/6 time signature. There's the schism there, but then also the dual vocal lines clashing too. There's a lot of syncopation in this section too because of the polymetric idea going on. I think that's the track that has resonated with me most. I don't think that it is a coincidence. It's also the one with the most theatrical performance from the vocalist. They are at the end having a bit of a breakdown, crying out of pain, emotional trauma happening in this track. All of that after probably one of the most intense sections, for me at least, with all of the clashing concepts. We have harmonic dissonance, so we have notes, sound waves that are clashing on a very physical sense. We have time signatures clashing as we have this hemiola concept, the 3-against-2 polyrhythm, as we have a 6/8 and a 3/4 time signature happening simultaneously. And then we also have the dual vocal layers, almost, lots of clashing there as they're just going off at the same time. There's not a call and response. There's not really even a measured timing element where one creates space for the other vocal line. They're just happening simultaneously. Pure counterpoint with no affordance or even care for what the other melody is bringing. And it's not really melodic either. I use the term counterpoint, but it's spoken word, almost to the point of acted speech, maybe. It's not really about counterpoint at that time. It becomes an argument. Two voices. I don't know if they're speaking to each other or not, but they certainly aren't listening to the other. How can they? They're trying to speak over them. One of the voices begins to have a crack in their voice, and it drifts into speaking through tears or sobs even, and this is the voice that we're left with at the end of the track. All of this coming together to paint a very theatric moment. From the musical parts to the performative parts, it is a song about people clashing and the pain that's left in the wake of that. I really enjoyed that. Not something I think I'm going to come back to very often, but as far as connecting with the art, this is the first track I've really done that with. I can see the vision on a lot of this album. I can appreciate the emotional weight and complexity throughout all of it, but I haven't really clicked with it. It's been appreciation from arm's length, an understanding of the artistic vision, and an understanding of it, but not something that I've enjoyed, I think is the wrong word, but again, emotionally connected with. I think a lot of that comes down to, one, the language barrier. I don't know what's being said until after the song is over. But the other, two, is spoken word really relies on either incredible acted performance to really sell the meaning of the words without an understanding of the words, again, language barrier, or an understanding of the words. Unlike music, which can convey emotion through the singing, you can't really convey much through lower energy speech, especially when the spoken word is, I don't want to say monotonous, but consistent throughout all of the tracks. I really can't say that any of the spoken word sections have changed too much. In fact, I think the largest deviation from this was in track 4, I believe it was, where we actually had a clean sung sentence. A single line, I believe, was cleanly sung, and that was a pretty big deviation from the spoken word that's dominated the rest of the album. The harshes, I did feel that the first track had a nice impactful moment to it, but for the most part, the harshes I'm not connecting with. It's pretty typical for harsh vocals for me. There is kind of one specific style that I can connect with. It's a type of fry scream, and it's usually used in contrast to cleans. What I get emotionally involved is how it escalates an idea, not necessarily the style itself. And as I mentioned earlier, this type of harsh it's not a favorite of mine. I don't really hear much intensity to it either. It does feel very human, though. It sounds somewhere close to a yell, a natural distortion of clean speech, but it isn't really something that's affected me yet. Not anything I've connected to on a deeper level than, pure understanding, that sort of academic enjoyment. Here, though, at the end, I found the performance finally broke through that language barrier, broke through the musical genre barrier, and hit me on a performative level. I appreciate all of that, the vulnerability here, but also the authenticity of it all. Black metal is not usually a genre I would describe as authentic. Yep, I can already hear the people slamming on their keyboards with the comments. It's a genre that to me feels, because of my overexposure, I'm sure, to the more traditional third wave stuff where every band kind of sounds the same to me at the end of the day, it is more of a texture than anything else. This to me feels authentic, taking that very traditional stereotypical sound and saying, what can we personally say with this in our own voice? I don't think it is a coincidence either that this is probably the least traditional black metal track on the album so far. It is the one that has steered closer to, honestly, kind of post-rock. A heavy post-rock, sure, with metallic sections, but the metal sections are kind of light on this. It's an interesting track right here, and I think a perfect way to wrap up the first half, to take a lot of the ideas that we've been presented with so far and expand on them to create something that hits hard. A point in the album to say, oh, things are changing. These guys are serious. I mean, it's not like I wasn't taking them seriously already, but here they're serious. This song means something to them. And that's not to say the other ones don't, but I feel it this time around. They're putting that extra oomph, that X factor into this track. The evolutions in this song felt larger, bigger swings. I could still find the patterns, the similarities between everything, but it felt grander in scope. Maybe some of this is retroactively painting the beginning of the song because of my emotional connection to the finale, but it is how I'm viewing it right now at the very least. Very much in line with what I expect of them, but taken to that next level. Everything else on here, solid 7, 8 out of 10. This is that 9 out of 10 song. This is that 10 out of 10 song. It's just got that extra bit of spice to it. And to socket that right in the middle of the album, I slurred a lot of that together. My southern drawl of just lacking enunciation. To socket that right in the middle of the album, it set me up to anticipate more, but also wonder what's around the corner. This was like a gut punch after I thought I knew what they were doing. This track title translates to Betrays. The song is, once again, a rather short stanza. I keep calling them stanzas because, as far as I can tell, both with the lyrics that I've been given and when I went looking for even just the Polish lyrics online to see if I could get spacing to, elements that would break up this block into smaller stanzas, there isn't any. I'm curious then if the band released the lyrics in this way. Every song is just one block of lines. So I don't know actually how this fits into, and this is true for all the songs so far, where the line breaks are, where I need to kind of understand groupings of ideas and maybe a shift to a new group of ideas. Regardless, this is shorter. Again, 8 lines maybe here, and they're repeated several times throughout this track, increasing in intensity until we get to the end. And as the title suggests, there's a betrayal at hand. This is all done through the metaphor of a wound, as if someone has been backstabbed, possibly, though not literally. It says, lips sink into blood, and in redness they dance after your tongue. With a scream you sever the smile, caressing roses up on the neck. Night will turn delight into shame, and in redness morning will scream from behind the windows, get out. So, at nighttime, it was supposed to be fun, relaxing, enjoyable. It says that the night will turn delight. So nighttime was originally supposed to be good. It says it will turn it into shame. And in redness, I think redness is interesting because the first time it is related to blood, that the blood on the lips, in redness they dance. But here the redness is the sun rising. It's a removal of the night. It's removing that shame and presenting information, truth, power, something along that lines. And it says that a scream will be heard that says, get out. The betrayal has been complete and our narrator has been hurt and demands that the other person leave their vicinity. It's interesting here, though, that telling the person to get out happens in the daytime, not at the nighttime. I wonder if this has to do with maybe a confidence in the self to tell this person to get lost. Or if maybe the information wasn't presented, the morning represents enlightenment of now learning this information that you've been betrayed. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this fits with the pain we heard at the end. I think it's also interesting that we didn't explore this type of performative showcase of emotions anywhere else on this album. Tracks 3 and 4 might not have fit, and well, honestly, I'm not too sure what track 2 is about yet, but track 1 is certainly about falling into a depression. And it does tie into this too. Again, I don't know if this is a concept album, but track 1 was about losing a love and about having that love be a bedrock to who you are personally. And that now that the love's not there, which could be because they're betrayed, they're at the edge, a precipice. And at the end, after all the color left, they fell. But we didn't hear any of this sorrow break through in the vocal performance at the end of track 1, only here at the end of track 5. So again, they withheld this. They put it here specifically. Most of the other tracks wouldn't have worked off of this, but we could have had a vulnerable vocal performance on track 1, especially given its almost 8-minute runtime. There was plenty of space in there to explore this. They chose not to, though. I do think it worked better to withhold it, present it here, have the audience caught off guard a little bit. Makes it feel more natural, too. There's a possibility this is all acted. There's also a possibility that just literally broke out into tears in the recording studio. That's always a possibility, too. But if it was intentional, if it is acted in any capacity, it was purposefully put here, not to kick off the album at an extreme, but to reach it later, especially to catch the audience off guard. We've already had depressive lyrics. Some of the lyrics have also been heavy. None of them have done this yet, though. You set up an expectation. Oh, it's just another black metal album. Got some dude screaming on it. Sometimes he talks. It's heavy. It's dreary. Oh, snap. This dude's crying now. Cuts expectations while also being emotionally vulnerable. That's a double whammy right there. It's going to add to the intensity of the scene, of the section of the track. Very well done. And patient, too. Some bands might want to put that at the beginning to show off, look, this is going to be a heavy album. I think it was well done to be a bit more restrained with it, bringing it up now. All right. The next track is Wybacza. Translates to forgives, which is a very interesting track to put after betrays. Let's dive into it. More traditional black metal sound here. So bring in the harsh vocals when we bring the energy down is a choice. Minimal guitar work too. The drums are keeping the pattern. Bass is just laying down his low ends. The guitar is sparse though, just a couple notes every once in a while. Lots of tension in that guitar though. So to set up the syncopation against the old backbeat and then use the syncopation as the new backbeat for a new tempo. What is this? This is very fun for as heavy as the atmosphere is. Some of those clean vocals again. He's got a good voice. Being whispered to. That 2 and 4 on the ride cymbal up on the bill, very bouncy. Light syncopation on the edge of the ride now. It's I'm not getting a good read on this. It's incredibly conflicted or conflicting. It reminds me of this black metal track we listened to a long time ago that was paired with a stage play.
nie opowiadaj takich
dig the variations on that descending riff. I don't know, it's growing on me. I like that riff. It's going on a bit long, but it's still a cool lick. I don't know about that track. I think what makes it even more confounding to me, and what makes it even more obtuse is compounding it against where we came from. I just talked about track 5 being the most emotional track. And I think that the back and forth on the vocals, the sort of dialogue approach is interesting. Maybe the lyrics add a little bit of context to that. Again, when it comes to spoken word, you kind of lose the musical component. So it really comes down to the words themselves, especially in something like this, which feels like pure dialogue between two of the same voice, which probably implies something within itself. But I don't know what the words are saying. I don't know what the conversation is, and that distances me from the message. But I will say the first half of this musically is absolutely bonkers. What is going on with any of this? It is fun, it is bouncy, the drum work is incredibly catchy. There is a fun little cartoony, syncopated, fast rhythmic thing in the guitar. The vocal work is even, I don't know, I don't want to use the word comical on any of this, but I think the fact that how much I chuckled and even laughed between minutes 1 and 3 of this, it kind of highlights what I'm getting at here. There's so much absurdity in this track. I don't get it. But then we move from that into a longer form exploration of a single mood, something that has weight and intensity to it, and eventually brings in a melodic lick that focuses on a descent, a downward movement that has a ton of tension in it, 1, but also 2, feels like a buzzsaw when we hit that final note. Something about the final tone in that descending riff feels sharper than the others. There is a real danger in this track, at least in the back half, that feels wildly out of place compared to the fun I had in the first half. I don't get this song, at least not yet. And for a track that is titled Forgives, I can see maybe some element of friction here, a schism between your want to forgive and your want to hold on to anger. I mean, it does come right after Betrays. This feels like a quick turnaround. If Betrays was you ruined my life and get out of my house or out of my life, literally the second after saying that, we have a track that's called Forgives. So there's already an interesting thing going on there as far as space between these two topics, whether the stories themselves are connected or not. The themes are right after one another. And I guess suppose that assumes the lyrics are talking about forgiveness at all. It could be about how I will never forgive you. So I suppose that's an angle on this. But then for the music to be sort of rhythmically boppy amidst this heavy atmosphere coming off of one of their most emotionally charged tracks, it threw me for a wild loop. This was a very confusing track for me. The other thing, though, is that there is a duality within it. I would say there is a very light connection between the first 3 minutes and the second 3 minutes of this track. There are some rhythmic cadence crossovers, but for the most part, I view them as two totally different sections of this song, which is something we haven't seen in a while. Tracks 3 through 5, at the very least, 2 to a lesser extent, are kind of focused on, here's our foundation, let's build from this until we reach the end. Track 1 was the only one that to me has felt linear in any sense, where we have shifted between core foundations. This is a track that's kind of returning back to that concept. And I don't think it's necessarily an idea of just bringing back something from the past. I think that it is about this conflict. There is an argument at the end that feels very literal in two sides having something to say to each other, but I think that having the music split in half as well, two clearly distinct ideas that start from nothing and evolve on their own, we are again looking at a schism. I find that to be really interesting. I will say, though, that the emotional texture and weight in this track, particularly the final 2 minutes of this song, is probably some of the best they have done, at least as far as creating an eerie, unsettling atmosphere filled with sounds that evoke both sadness and tension. The guitar tone in here, the riff itself, the reverberations that allow the notes to continue to ring out and clash with notes that will come later, the general drum work, the low-end bass just kind of holding down this one note for this entire time almost makes it feel like there's no chord progression at all because of this single pedal tone. All of it feeds together into this very dense emotional atmosphere. I don't really get a lot of forgiveness or positivity or extending an olive branch kind of vibe on this track. It just feels heavy and weighty while also uncertain about things. There is also the general bleak sadness that has been persistent through the entire album, and actually, I guess just from that perspective, I do find it interesting that each of these 6 tracks so far have had a harmonic personality to them, despite all of them having, again, that bleak sadness. That's rather persistent, and yet I don't think too many of these tracks, I don't think I'd get them confused. They all have unique components to them. Atmospherically, even, harmonically, they are exploring different things. And I appreciate that variety there, despite keeping the thread that ties it all. Unfortunately had some technical difficulties. The last sentence was cut off, though we only lost about 2 seconds. I was basically saying that I enjoyed how everything was tied together, had unified theming to it all, but it's still quite distinct from track to track. Now the lyrics for this one, Wybacza. Once again, actually, I guess looking at the rest of these lyrics, they're all fairly short, contained, only a few lines each. This one says, morning understatements between the coffee and the argument sound quieter than slowly poured boiling water, and they burn less. You froth gracefully on the surface like white added to me. Go now, this light blinds me. I will wipe my apologies off the table. I can afford nothing more. I will say nothing more. I don't know. There's definitely a mixed feeling here. there was an apology placed somewhere in this for having a few tracks so far focus on the end of a relationship and the pain that comes through that. This one is a bit of an olive branch, or at least at one point it was. An apology was made, an attempt to repair this bridge between these people, but it's awkward. It says that the sound of the understatements, and understatements is an interesting word right there. It's all put as one, like to understate something, but also a statement itself. It could be that this is just idle talk, idle banter between these two people. What used to be calm and relaxed, just natural flowing conversation, feels stilted, feels controlled in a way, trying to purposefully create something that is light and calm in conversation, and through that creating something that is just not very comfortable, ironically. But it says through this, the other person begins to become a light, like white, and blinds our narrator, and they take back their apology. It says that they can't afford this anymore, but that they also don't know, as if they are second guessing their decision to attempt to repair this bridge at all. And I think this is interesting because I mentioned that the song, the atmosphere, the harmonic element doesn't really feel like forgiveness. Almost wonder if this is purposeful, to create a sound that opposes the initial intentions of the track lyrically and foreshadows what's going to be at the end. To take back the forgiveness, to take back the apology, to take back the attempt to repair this. Instead, to come to the conclusion that they don't know what to do. Should they try to rekindle this relationship? Should they just go their separate ways? The final sentence is, I don't know. And I love that. There's a lot of art out there that is very, shoulders back, upright, very clearly stated opinion. Sometimes even opinions written as facts, but a clear understanding of where someone stands on a topic and presenting that perspective through their art. Very rarely do we get what I think is a very human perspective. Confusion. To be bombarded with information, to see that two different or three or multiple perspectives all have valid elements to them. Maybe none more valid than another, but it's difficult to choose which one you are connecting with most. In this case, do they want to repair this? Do they want to just move on? They did want to repair it 5 lines ago. Now they're not so sure. Something changed their minds. They're left with uncertainty. I don't know if I would, across the board, just want to see uncertainty in music more often, but I do think it's neat when I find it. We're going to be moving on. As I mentioned earlier, the remaining 4 tracks are all on the shorter side. I may end up running both of these together, as track 8 is only 3.5 minutes long. It's pretty short. In fact, it's the shortest one on the album. But we'll see what I have to say about track 7, which I believe is pronounced Meleka. Melecha? One of y'all will have to let me know about that one. I think my pronunciations have been passable so far. This is definitely the one I was least confident in. Let's kick it, see what's going on. Okay, I don't know the tempo here. Oh, I do. But it's like 3-bar or 6-bar phrases, depending on how you're feeling the time. Oh, no. Yeah, so we're looking at 10 beat. So it could be two groups of 5 rather than the 4-4-2 I was conducting. Yeah, the second half gets off because it really is broken up into 4-4-2. But I'd probably write it in 5. I love the delicateness of this. There's a tenderness that we haven't really heard on the album. Okay. This is so simple compared to some of my favorite parts of the album, and yet it's gripping. Oh, I can't wait to see what they do with this. That is a very fast 4, but it's juxtaposed by the 3 also. Yeah, so once again we have the hemiola present. Another one that's using opposing a spoken word. Yes. It's like a train, dude. It took a while, but now we're just barreling through the tracks. Even the ride cymbal, emphasizing the downbeats in that triplet. That's what gives it the chugging feel. Just the isolation of this part. And that is sort of a weak resolution as well. Like, there is elements in that melody where I could make an argument. Yeah, that works as a finale. It's not incredibly strong though. It's passable, but it's not a good way to end it. It feels like there's more to be said. And the guitarist just doesn't. Whether they choose to not finish that or they are interrupted somehow. The guitarist just doesn't wrap that up where I would expect it, where it feels like it's directing to go. Very interesting. I had mentioned that track 6, was it 6 or 5? I think it was 6, was my favorite track on the album thus far. And it got dethroned real quick. It's still a strong track. But I do think that we're only one song past it, so and I'll take this for a grain of salt. We still have some album to go through and explore, but I do think that it marks a turning point in the album. I had mentioned how it's doing some things differently. It waited a while to pull this rug out after setting up expectations of what the album was, and I think it's going to go through with the twist. This was incredibly strong. Once again, though, we have a track that is built all off of one idea. We start off with a rhythm, isolated instrument, sparse performance. Really isn't a lot, so little. I was going to say so much little. There's so much of that nothing going on. There's so little instrumentation at the beginning that I couldn't even figure out the time signature. In retrospect, yeah, 5/4 makes a lot of sense there, but I initially thought that it was a tempo thing I was missing more than anything else. But that's just because there's no landmarks. You get a couple of, it was a guitar. I don't remember if it was electric or bass, but you get a couple of notes and then it rings out and then there's silence for quite some time before it comes back. There's nothing to really judge out of here. The only rhythmic information we have is the delay on the guitar as we kind of get these little wah, 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 these little bursts that come after it that signify a rhythmic device, but by no means does the delay have to line up with the pulse of a section. So in this case it did, but it could have also been a type of red herring there, something to give the illusion of a tempo without actually giving it away, so that when the full band comes in, you can still be caught off guard, but that idea can still represent some sort of polyrhythmic idea against the core backbeat. Regardless, sparse intro, we bring in the full band and we instantly go back to this idea of strife, of clash. And once again, it is a temporal one. And once again, it is a hemiola, a 2 against 3, putting 4 beats in the span of 6 beats. And the cool thing is, though, is that here it's very straightforward. It's almost no fluff. There is a lower part, I think it's the bass guitar and the bass kick, giving 1 set, the triplets in this case, the groups of 3. And then you have your snare cracks on the 2 and 4 within the 4/4 framing. These 2 parts are what create the clash, but there's no cool syncopation around it. Both of these ideas are rigid within themselves. They are perfectly representing the cadence of the time signature that they're in. The syncopation, the rhythmic variability to it, come through the lens of how these 2 separate rhythmic ideas bounce around each other and dance around each other. But on the surface, if you isolate them, it's very rigid. You get your 3s, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the other one, you get 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very rigid. No spice to it at all. This is incredibly important because eventually we're going to drop the 4 entirely and focus just on the 3. And this is where the train sound comes in. As every instrument leans into this 3, and instead of having this clash going on, you have this hyper focus on a single rhythmic device. More instruments come in, the guitars grow in size, the drum work comes in to hyper emphasize this, not just the bass kick, but bringing the snare in line with the 3 and doing the ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta on the ride cymbal to further emphasize this movement. And it is that chug, emphasize 1, de-emphasize 2 and 3, that creates this feeling of chugga, 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 chugga. You know what, too? At least in Western onomatopoeia, when we talk about trains, at least in my mind, it is in groups of 3. Chugga, 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 chugga. I've never noticed that. I'm curious if that's specifically what they were going for, or now if this is, pop culture bias, injecting how I'm reading, or injecting into how I'm reading this. I want to go back to like some old, kids cartoons, particularly from the 90s, and listen to trains and see if they're in groups of 3, if that's why I make that association. Although I guess it wouldn't just be kid stuff too, it could be anything. Anyways, I'm off topic here. But yeah, dude, how you grow up, your environment, the things you hear, the sounds you associate with visuals, that all bleeds into how you understand music. So you always got to keep an eye out for your own biases. Anyways, though, the entire end of this track to me feels like a train, and it just takes off and it keeps going. These instruments all come together. And then we end with just the guitar solo. We had this idea of isolation, clashing duality, back to a singular focus but driven, and then we return to isolation again. And I'll say, dude, the guitar melody here is sparse, as the guitar part has been. We actually introduced this guitar part at the end of the train section, right before we bring back the vocals the final time, and it continues its idea into this outro. Once again, everything fluidly moving into one another. Ideas are presented in evolutionary fashion as well as foreshadowing, bringing this idea in previously so that when we transition to guitar in isolation, we can say, oh yeah, this is the same guitar from a couple bars ago. Makes sense. But the melody is heartbreaking. There's so much vulnerability to it aside from just the atmosphere, the texture of it. Aside from the fact it's a solo guitar with a lot of reverb on it, which is already introducing feelings of loneliness. I think the note choices lean into this too, but also the sparseness of melody. It all sort of showcases someone who has run out of things to say. Maybe they're too shy to say anything. I don't know. Maybe they just don't want to be vulnerable in front of people. They don't want to feel like they're a burden on anyone else. But here, by themselves, it's just a couple of notes. Somber, melancholic notes. The note choices are so particular. They're landing on these key notes really importantly, but they're not choosing to play much between them. It is minimal melody writing, which I think speaks a lot for something that is in isolation and loneliness. But there's something else that plays into this too, why I find this to be so affecting, and it's actually what precedes it. The vocal part here, of course, was split into 2. We had the call and response spoken word stuff that we have seen before, and then one of the voices centers and then grows into the harsh. And for whatever reason, the higher harsh on this really clicked during the train section. It just felt like all of this energy was welling up inside, and the vocalist couldn't get that lower growl anymore. It forced itself into these higher, almost shrieks. I think if the vocalist wanted to push a little bit further, they could get into a very traditional black metal sound right here. And they chose to sort of find a midpoint, but by contrast, it's still a painful, harsh vocal there. Not that it's inducing pain to do it, that the technique is poor or anything like that. It sounds like someone in emotional turmoil. My heartstrings are being pulled at here at the end of this section, and then the electric guitar comes in and dances with the vocalist. The intense melancholy of this minimal melody paired with the extreme pain in the vocals. And then it seems at the point where words no longer do this justice, we let the guitar speak for the vocalist, for the song at large. And we're left with just this lonely guitar weeping, not saying much at all, but saying so much through so little. Yeah, this album, which wasn't really grabbing me by tracks 4 and 5, is taking a very interesting turn. And I'm kind of starting to enjoy it. There's a lot of really strong artistic elements to it, and they're cutting through the metaliness of it and connecting, and I appreciate that. All right. This one, the title translates to Keeps Silent. once again, a few lines, and I'm a little confused, but I think this one does lean into the lost in translation element. I think there is something poetic that doesn't quite come through a more direct translation. Either that or the things are directly translated, but these phrases don't mean the idioms that they mean in Polish. It says, "Be silent. I'm up to the brims of my lips." And so it doesn't crawl out that you're lying. Spit me out first, then speak. This is interesting. The idea of "I'm up to the brims of my lips," to me, could be talking about frustration, which is how we would use something like that in the West. At least for me, I've heard this all over the place from all sorts of, particularly parents talking to children. Like, I've had it up to here with this nonsense, this feeling of being overburdened by something. That's how I read that, though I'm not sure if maybe being up to the brims of one's lips is a different phrase or have a different meaning in Polish. But the idea, talk to me before I find out that you're lying, before it comes out that you're lying to me. But he says, spit me out first and then speak. The idea of having someone in your mouth while you speak ill of them, while you lie to them, yeah, that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm trying to figure out a cool metaphor for that, or maybe just some perspective to see on that. But I do get the message across that this person's tired of being lied to. That's what I get out of these first few lines, in my gut at least. Even if I don't have a proper understanding of it, that's the gist I'm getting. It ends, though, and says, "I will cling to the street like a stone, and from there have no weight. A child will pick me up in his hands. He will throw me and forget me, nothing more." What? Cling to the street because lies have no weight there. I don't know what it is about streets where lies mean nothing, or maybe no one lies. I don't know what's up with the child throwing him and then forgetting about him. I don't know. This stuff doesn't really make any sense to me. But again, something I think got lost in translation. Maybe if there are any Polish speakers out there, these are all hand translated, so I appreciate that. I'm sure you can find the lyrics on Genius or Metal Archives. I'll double check for you next time I pause. If you want to head over to track 7, if you're a Polish speaker, and let me know what your interpretation is of those last 4 lines, I'm all ears. Or any other time that I've been a bit confused by the translations today, because, as usual, there's going to be poetic elements and figurative elements lost anytime you translate from one language to another. So I think that's what's happening in a couple of these tracks. But I do get the gist of it. I mean, it starts off, this one just says, "Be silent," and the last 2 tracks have been about being backstabbed, being betrayed. So, generally this whole album has been about the end of relationships. People you thought you knew, and they ended up harming you where you were hoping they'd have your back. So now you're upset or sad, you're lonely or angry about it. A lot of this album has been about negativity, about failed relationships. So this one, telling someone to be quiet because they're lying, lines up with a lot of the album, and that's kind of supporting my personal idea that I'm reading this correctly on some level. All right, the next track is called Błądzi, translates to wanders. Let's dive into this. I like that little snare pattern at the end of that last passage. So this high contrast passage here between a low tone and a high tone. So much tension. Eerie but dark. There's an unsettling element to this. We have this A-B-A-B idea here. The B is rather short-lived though. It does introduce all that tension and eeriness. So this is a cool breakdown version of that high contrast A section. Oh. It's faster. Yeah, it's like a double time version of it. And now just focusing on the contrast, a more minimal version of it. They do a great job of recontextualizing ideas and re-envisioning them. Without the return to the root, just staying on that tension. Yeah, we'll push it into the next one. I don't have a lot to add to that. It's a very straightforward track. Really focusing on that contrast idea and sprucing it up, mutating it across the entirety of the song. Yeah. Everything is on the offbeat. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Makes the back half very fun, especially since it starts on the and of 4 of the first bar, and then keeps that offbeat syncopation into the second bar. Oh, but it alternates. This one's offbeat, this one's downbeat. And then this one's offbeat. Very cool, very cool. It makes it feel slightly off since it's never consistent from phrase to phrase. It is a larger pattern. Dude, that whole step jump, it would be more menacing with a half step, but it feels empowering, imposing maybe even because it's a whole step. A very interesting. Oh, that's pretty cool. I like this in version 2 where the bass descends multiple notes, whereas the old riff was an ascension of just one note. Crosses the bar line too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's the and of one where we reset rather than one. Dude, that China, we haven't heard any China on this album. We're really smashing that thing. In fact, I can't remember hearing any China cymbals in any black metal, despite how gnarly of a cymbal sound it is. You'd think it'd be right up the alley for the genre. I'm a little worried this is going to go into the next track. That's a lot of energy, especially since, you know, if we're going to talk about endings on this album, a lot of the times we are looking at kind of muted endings, at least in the songs I can remember. It's possible I'm forgetting a few endings on this, but a lot of them sort of taper down. We reach a nice finale point, but given all of the tension and sounds and layers and honestly noise, there's guitar feedback in this outro here, it really felt like it was ready to explode into something larger. And quite frequently I have heard bands use this exact kind of layered noise and texture in order to transition from one track to another, or from one idea to another at the very least. But if you're going to put it at the end of the song, it usually erupts into the next track, because it does build and retain a lot of energy. That energy needs to go somewhere. It's what makes this sort of feel, I don't know, anticlimactic in a way, unfulfilled possibly might be another way to look at it. It's like filling up a glass of water, and the water is getting to the top of the glass, You keep pouring, but instead of overflowing, it just kind of stops. You don't know where the water is going. You're still pouring, but it's not spilling out. Where's that water going? This is the type of musical conundrum I'm at. All this energy, where did it go? It just dissipated. It was pointing towards somewhere, and now it's not doing what it told me it was going to do, what I expect it to do. Very interesting to do this in the penultimate track as, like I said, they've sort of set up expectations for how they end songs. They find pretty definitive conclusions, usually by tapering things down, and here they allow things to run up right to the edge, and before anything bad happens, they just stop. Very interesting. This track does kind of what we've been seeing a few of these tracks doing here, and of course the idea of taking a simple idea and expanding on it is something the album's been doing phenomenally well. Taking this idea of just two note movement. It's interesting too because track 8 was focusing on high contrast. From low tones to high tones to low tones to high tones. The entire song was built around that idea. We slowed it down. We stuck with just the key tones. We sped it up. We did all sorts of cool things around these two notes. Here we're kind of doing the same thing, two notes, but the difference is instead of a large gap for a low and a high, we have a whole tone difference here, at least in the core riff. Or whole note, sorry. Whole tone's a totally different thing. Whole notes are basically two half notes or semitones. Something we've explored. I wish I had a small keyboard I could pick up and show. The keyboard on my desk is kind of large, but if you look at a keyboard and you see a white or a piano and you see a white and a black key together, that's a half step. They're right next to each other. A whole step would be two places. So you go from the white to the black to the white. That's pretty much what all chords are based off of, is whole note movement and half note movement. A lot of the times we'll use a half to create tension. Usually you're not going to see a half tone movement too often in a scale. Like three of them. Okay, no, I take that back. I don't know what I was thinking there. When used in a melody though, or especially a harmony, they're incredibly tense. To move back and forth between them creates a lot of tension. And if you play a half step interval together, it's just not going to be sounding great. This is the kind of thing that is it's the basis of panic chords. Granted, you usually work with an octave there too, so it's technically a ninth, but that's getting into theory. The idea is you're still taking two notes that are like right next to each other and playing them together. So the half step usually introduces negative emotions, tension, anxiety, animosity, eeriness, fear, that type of thing. And bouncing between them can create that kind of feeling. Bouncing between whole steps, though, in this case, ended up creating something that feels powerful, overwhelming, looming might even be a word for it. It isn't something that's scary, as well as something that feels overwhelming. Now, fear can certainly play into that, and I don't think they did it specifically here, but I'm not saying that if you use this alternating whole note thing, you're going to end up with, this looming sound all the time. You can pair it with all sorts of harmonic devices and use that to explore a whole load of areas, just like with anything with music. But here, it creates something imposing. Like a wall, a massive wall you've just walked up to and you have no idea how to surmount. And it feels powerful. Dude, that is a phenomenal moment in this track. Absolutely loved that. The other thing that really stands out to me on this song is the rhythmic devices all over the place. This was very fun to listen to. I initially thought it was an odd time signature because the rhythm just never matched up to what I expected. And of course, as I explored during the reaction itself, it's because we're shifting from beginning the dum 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 dum, the finale of the riff. We shift it from starting on the and of 4 to beat 4. And this shifts the entire quarter note phrase from downbeats to offbeats. And this happens every time. We're just constantly alternating between these. So sometimes it feels like it's half of a beat longer. Sometimes it feels like it's half of a beat shorter. I find this to be really interesting. Normally, when I talk about devices like this, of shortening or lengthening a phrase, it can feel like we're extending an idea or lurching into the next phrase too soon. or I guess those are the two main ones. And this is interesting because I get notions of that without the general feeling. There have certainly been passages on this album. In fact, if I remember correctly, track 1 had it where we were alternating between a 7-beat phrase and an 8-beat phrase, with the 7-beat phrase being the 8 minus the final beat on it. And it felt like we were expecting that last beat and we just don't get it. You trip into the beginning of the phrase again. That doesn't really happen here. There are moments where I feel like time stretches and then I key in, I'm like, oh, why did it feel like that? And then it's fine. And that's because we've shifted back to the downbeat instead of the offbeat version. And I think this is really interesting because it all fits within 4/4. The time signature is consistent here. It's actually the melody itself that is adjusting to fit within the new time signature. And there at the end of the track, I had mentioned that we actually play across bar lines here too. Instead of repeating the phrase on beat 1 as would be expected, you repeat the phrase on the and of 1. Or at least that's how I interpret it, because we're still on the higher note when we get to beat 1. And then a half of a beat later, we return back to that home. And the home feels like the beginning to me. They play around with this in really interesting ways that never ever feel like it is wrong. We never lurch into anything, and the feeling of, wow, we're in this for a bit longer than we should, is more of a fleeting thought than a direct feeling of, oh, they've definitely extended things out here. In fact, again, going back to track 1 where they injected those 2 beats into the middle and turned it from a 7-beat idea to a 9-beat idea, and then that made it feel like we were just in that moment for so much longer. Yeah, we don't really get that here. It's a fleeting idea. Like, oh wait, wasn't that shorter last time? I felt like there was more space between the last note and a return to the beginning. But we're talking about half of a beat here. And it's an implied half of a beat because the time signature doesn't change. When the time signature changes, that's where we typically feel those slip-ups. So it's a really impressive way of messing around with time feel without messing around with time signature, and doing so in a subtle way that's supposed to get you subtly off guard without really knowing why. And they do it in a plethora of ways across 2 or 3 different iterations of the same melody. And it's just, dude, it is so well done, dude. I wish I could write cool ideas as subtle as this. It's just kind of sneaky. And I think when you pair that with this feeling of the almost abrupt, overwhelming feeling of that whole step movement, it begins to feel like something that just kind of popped up. You thought you were clear. You turn back to make sure, nothing's coming up on you. You look forward and now there's a massive wall here. You're like, well, how do I clear this? Where did this come from? I wasn't expecting this. And it's so big. It's so massive. You're kind of taken aback. How could you not have seen this on the horizon? There's no way you missed this giant wall. It feels unnatural. But nothing about it feels off either. If you had seen this wall, you would not question it. If you had seen the wall coming, you would not question it at all. There's nothing odd about the wall itself. The oddity is that it is here at all. And you have no idea how to get around it. But it's not really strange in and of itself. And that sort of uncanny area, sort of a Twilight Zone feeling, is what this song captures really well. Everything seems right, but something is definitely off. You just can't quite put your finger on it. It's something that sits underneath the surface and requires a little bit of interrogation to even figure out why you're feeling the way you are. Yeah. Dude, just masterclass, I think, in this entire concept of subtle emotive writing, which is a wild twist on this album, which I think has been very clear about its emotional ideas. This has not really been an album of subtlety in a lot of ways. And here we are, the penultimate song, doing the coolest subtle ideas entirely, just really catching me off guard. I honestly think if I was listening to this more casually and not just on the lookout at all times for details and patterns and stuff, I don't know that I would have caught on to this at all. It would have just been something I grooved to. Again, it's so subtle. It sits underneath the surface. It's a feeling I might have got from the song, but not one I would have noticed enough to explore. Not on a first time, anyways. One of those things I might pick up on later. Why am I feeling this way? So good. Dude, this band is really surprising me. I thought I knew who they were 2-3 tracks in, and the back half of this album is so excellently composed, performed, produced. Yeah, I'm kind of coming around on the album. All right. Błądzi's lyrics revisit a few of the topics we've explored in the past. One is the devotedness of our narrator to this other person. At one point says that your breath will mark the path like with bread. So as if laying down breadcrumbs, I will follow your breath on these stones. And says, I will die eating every crumb. Just, I will follow you wherever you go, even up to my death. This is something we've explored. I don't remember what the track it was, but this idea of just, every ounce of your being for someone else. What I think is interesting here is what precedes this. It says that autumn sinks up to your neck. So we're up to here in autumn time. I don't know what makes that so, well, okay, autumn is also a season for death. If we look at seasons through the perspective of death and life, autumn is where the leaves fall, the trees decay. Spring is life. It's where everything comes back. Maybe that's what he's saying, that this is the death. We're relating it to the decay of the flora. He says, though, that a footstep traverses the streets and discovers stone on stone, and on that stone, yet another stone. I wonder if this has any more meaning than the direct idea that this is just a street made out of stones. I don't know. From here, though, he says, your breath will mark the path and I'll eat every crumb. He says, but I won't find you. I saved this part for now. If we've explored the theme of every fiber of my being is yours previously, this part rediscovers the truth behind that this person is going to dedicate their life to someone who seemingly doesn't care about them. Maybe it's because they don't know them. Maybe it's because they never cared about them. Who knows? We don't get the other person's perspective at all. But the realization here is that they will do everything to follow in this other person's footsteps, and yet they will never catch up. The track ends with, explain this to the children. Tell them this story with words, that your oath was made of leaves and my memory. I think this does line up with the concept of leaves falling in autumn, eventually dying and decaying. That this person's oath was no more worth than a dead leaf. And he wants everyone to know about this for some reason. He says, tell this to the children. Tell them with words. I don't know how else you tell them with pictures. I don't know. Maybe that's another, again, an idiom or a phrase that's common in Polish that we don't really have a direct analogy for in American English. But I think the idea here is a realization that devoting your life to someone else isn't worth it. That in the end, you're not going to meet them. You're not going to be with them. They're always going to be one step ahead of you. You're going to be chasing the remnants of them. In this case, the breath that leaves a mark on the path. And that he wants everyone to know about it for some reason. I don't know, but he does. Track 9, Starzeje, translates loosely to ages. And this does talk about time. It says time is already biting your braids, whitened hair cracks from its teeth. The idea that time is turning your hair white, an incredibly interesting metaphor for this idea in and of itself, that as you get older, your hair turns white, turning time into a beast that bites your hair until it's white. But it also talks about time being behind you. I think that's interesting too. It says, you will have his hunger exclusively, and the insatiable one will look under the sleeve and tell the story of veins in blue. He will count for you the seconds of syllables, and what remains will be good. What is missing, bad. So time is the insatiable one. No one can escape it. Time is never full, never satisfied. It will always consume seconds from everyone. I'm not sure about the idea of looking under the sleeve and telling the story of veins in blue. But he says he will count the seconds of syllables. What remains is good, what's missing is bad. Memories, possibly. What you remember is the stuff you want to. What you don't is the stuff that wasn't worthwhile. I don't know. The final line, though, is old age knows how to be young also. Yeah. I have seen older people, even in their 70s, 80s, still light up like a child when things catch their attention. So I don't think youthfulness is something that only the youth have. It just gets harder to express as the body begins to weaken and break down. I don't know that I understand all of it, but it is certainly talking about somebody nearing the end of their life. Though what is interesting here is the lack of an eye. Almost every track has explored an eye, the perspective of the narrator and what they want out of life, what they're missing in life, how someone else hurt them, how they feel right now. This one is exclusively in the second person. Time is biting your braids. You will have his hunger. The insatiable one will look under your sleeves. He will count the seconds of syllables for you. There is not a single first person in here. First person word. I wonder why. It could be that the narrator is specifically speaking about someone else, but given how vague this entire album has been, with most songs sitting around 8 to 10 lines each, I don't really have a lot to go on about relationships in specific. Everything seems to be a bit generalized. And with this one also being a general you, I'm not sure, is this an outside force speaking to our narrator, that after all of these years of trying to repair relationships and chase people and try to have these connections, and ultimately it seems failing in the end, both on their part and others, this is time. This is the person on their deathbed. Maybe this entire album is a recollection of memories. Both, well, I was going to say both good and bad, but mostly bad, I would say. and this is time, or the reaper, ready to take them, speaking to the narrator in second person, as we are from death's or time's perspective. That's my best read on it, though, and I don't have a lot to base that on. It is a gut feeling of kind of wanting to make some sort of idea here and have some sort of read on this, despite the fact that I can't support it with the lyrics themselves, nor really the music, though there is the temporal shifting in the song. I want to tie that to the concept of time in some way, shape, or form, but also rhythmic groove breakdowns and temporal adjustments between phrases and between sections and phrases is something they've been exploring in general on the album. So maybe this is some foreshadowing they've been doing, or the simpler answer is this is just the kind of music they make, and it just happens to be that they're singing about time in their style, which tends to be rather temporal. We're going to wrap this up with the title track, Zasypia. Let's see how they wrap this up. It is 3. No, that's 7. Oh, it's 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. There is an extension somewhere though. (17:16) is what we're in, or 17:8 probably. Still, it is wild. 5, 5, 5, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, dude. Wild. What a bonkers idea. Lots of tension, uncertainty, especially harmonic uncertainty. I don't really know what key we're in. There's an ambiguity to this. Just bouncing between 2 notes as well leaves a lot of space for the chord itself. I'm going to tell you, as I mentioned at the beginning of the album, this word, Zasypia, loosely translates to falls asleep. Not a bit of this song is going to do that for me. This is the exact opposite of a lullaby. First of all, especially on the back half, it is loud, it is abrasive, dude screaming, the guitars are massive, so much bassiness to it. It's a very full sound, it's aggressive, but it's also so rhythmically choppy. I mean, from the start, I really wanted to engage a little bit more with the emotional side of things, but once I picked up that it was kind of working with ambiguity in general, I figured, oh, I'll figure that one out later. Let me get to this other crazy puzzle. What is this time signature? And, you know, longtime viewers, I'm pretty quick on the uptake for meter. For me to have sat here, what was it, 25, 30, 35 seconds to get this time signature understood, that's massive. And there have been times at this point, 30 seconds in, I'm like, yeah, screw it. There's too many other things to check out. I don't really have time to figure out the time. But given the homogeneity of the song and its sort of singular focus, which, again, a lot of this album has done, create an idea and expand on it. And this 5-5-5-2 idea, the 17-beat phrase, is persistent through the entire song. The harmonic elements are fairly consistent through the entire song. But between that and the fact that I was right on the cusp, this isn't a case where I was like, dude, I have no idea. I'm trying my best. I'm totally lost. I wasn't lost. I was like 80% there. I was like, I'm gonna figure this out right here, right now. If I have to rewind it, I'm figuring it out right here. It is a bonkers idea based entirely around push and pull and then being tripped into lots of pushing. So the pull is the extensions, and this is the extension of the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And you get this rise. It stretches time out because the 2 hits sound so quick. And that is how the 5 is broken up. We have 3 sets of these 5s, which are divided into groups of 3 and 2. And then we just have another of those 2 at the end. So it feels like we have that faster section over and over again. And of course, the 3 starts with the same 2 notes as the 2. So it actually sounds like we're starting it for a third time before we get that third note in there that indicates, oh yeah, this is the 3, which is really what was throwing me off more than anything else, is the fact that the 3s and the 2s are the same thing, except the 3s have 1 extra note. Almost every part of this rhythm itself, this melody, sounds identical. It's just sometimes there is 1 extra note, and that makes it really tough to follow along when there's such short phrases. And that's what really threw it off. But the thing is, once I solved the puzzle, the song makes a lot of sense. And I love this feeling of being thrust into this whirlwind to make sense of it and then to still be whirlwindy. Does that make sense? The push and the pull and the constant pulls at the end, or the constant pushes at the end, they create this feeling of never really being able to catch your balance. Say you're sprinting, or at the very least running, and you trip. Maybe you don't pick your foot up high enough and your toe grazes the asphalt or whatever you're running on, and you just kind of lurch forward a little bit. Your feet have slowed down because of the friction, but your body isn't ready for it, and you're in that weird phase where you're kind of stumbling. You're trying to catch your balance, but you can't. You're still running at a pretty fast speed, but like your body's forward and you're like just trying to get yourself upright and balanced again. Now just imagine that you can't do that for an entire 4 minutes of a song, because the ground is changing every second and a half. The terrain is altering. You're doing well enough to stay upright. You're not falling and tumbling, but you're just never getting back to your state of control. And that's what this song feels like to me. if I look at it as 5-5-5-2, it doesn't really tell that story. But the 3-2-3-2-3-2-2-3-2-3-2-3-2-2, even that in and of itself has this feeling of consistency and then expansion, then consistency and expansion. It is this feeling on almost every level of this metrically, whether you look at it from the minute, smallest forms to the fives to even the larger, 16 bar phrases. It's all about push and pull. And when you get that on every single layer, you're going to find that pulls and pushes are being done in opposition to each other based on what layer you're looking at. And it makes the entire song feel incredibly difficult to get a sense for direction. Even when I understand what is going on, it is still a whirlwind. And I think that is just so cool. Again, it's one of those subtle things where, you listen to this, and unlike track 9, I think you can immediately tell, hey, dude, something's up with this rhythmically. This is wild stuff. But it never really goes away. It never really becomes groovy. You can groove with it. You can eventually learn how to work within the whirlwind itself, but you're never touching that ground again. This tornado's got you. That metaphor, I think, slowly stopped working. But I think you get the gist of it, or at least I hope you do. And to me, that is this song. A lot of the harmonic value is still the tension, the ambiguity. A lot of this is focusing just on 2 notes and nothing else, and 2 notes do not make a key. They make a chord, the smallest chord, a dyad. It has the least amount of information. We could probably take a few of these dyads and figure out what key we're in, but at no point do I feel like there is enough harmonic information to say, oh, we're definitely within this chord or this key, because there's just not enough information to tell. And the entire song feels like that. And I think that pairs very well with the lack of landmarking it's not a lack of landmarking, with the constant changing in the metric element, the rhythmic element. You can kind of get a gist for everything, but by no means are you ever going to feel safe or completely understand what's happening at any point. It is a song that pretty much on every level is designed to keep you off balance. And I think it does that with ease. It makes it look so easy too. Like, I break it down, I'm like, this is made up of a lot of simple ideas. They're just executed in such a complex way through concepts of layering. Once again, I am quite fascinated by what this band is doing. It makes me want to go back to the first half. Maybe not right now, but certainly sometime. Return to those tracks and see them through the eyes of experience. Hear them through the ears of experience. That's probably more accurate. Now that I know what the album's doing, and see if there's something I missed there. I do like my conclusion here, that there is a rug pull at the midpoint of the album, and then they choose to explore more interesting ideas. But it's also a frequent phrase of mine that they're doing what they've been doing this whole time. And if they've been doing this the whole time, why didn't I get these feelings or emotions or understandings at the beginning? It could be absolutely familiarity. The more I listened to their style, the more nuance I found within it. So the first few tracks felt a bit more simple than the last few, simply because I wasn't familiar enough to hear the details of it. I don't know. I think both processes, both styles would work well, whether it is just emotionally resonant all the way through, or if there is a rug pull. Both of them are very cool. But I'm curious what actually happened. But I think that's going to wrap up my musical thoughts on this album. I've had kind of a mixed experience with it. Started out mostly appreciating it from a distance, and here at the end really coming to enjoy what they're doing artistically. I do know this is their latest album, 2025. Might have to check out some of their older stuff, though. I did see that one of the live streams I think it's not tomorrow, but next week, might be the week after. We do have another track from this group we're going to check out during the live stream. So that might be a good indicator if I want to dive into their older works or not. All right, lyrics. Well, in what I described as their most, well, whirlwindy song, the most disorienting track, it's actually their most optimistic lyrically. As heavy as the ending of this song is, the end of this track focuses on a better tomorrow. Once again, we look at the concept of sleeping and particularly the cycle of day and night. We had seen this earlier with whatever song was about betrayal. I think that was track 5. About how when the sun came up, there was a realization of the lies of the other person and they told them to get out, that the sun brought truth with it. Here we kick off with the idea that darkness is the dream of eyes, and people will send hands to it like letters. Everyone places hope in its moist bread. I don't get it. People hope for darkness to fix things. Although it could be that darkness is a stand-in for dreams, as it does call the dream of eyes. Darkness doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It is the place where we sleep and dream and hopefully have good dreams. It's also the place of nightmares. They don't touch on that at all. But it is interesting how darkness has been a negative in this album, and now it is a neutral zone, possibly. I say that because we're going to head into the opposite of it in a moment. It says, all the children of morning, morning as in a daytime, not sorrow, will finally find their return. Night will raise us for death. Not too sure about that line, but it feels incredibly important. It then says that it is known that time is needed, so sleep now. We can change everything with light. So you sleep, so you can rest, hopefully wake up with a more rational mind, possibly. A lot of decisions are best slept on. The idea that when you wake up, you'll have a little distance to the decision itself, and maybe a better decision will come from it. We can change everything with light. So once again, putting light in the positive in opposition to the darkness, which is a place for dreams, and people send hopes to it. Although it doesn't say that it actually helps with the hopes, just as people put their hopes in their dreams. That's it. A repetition of go to sleep now. We can change everything with light. I don't know how this relates to everything else. I'm going to open up the mic here to everyone else. If you have your own interpretation, let me know. This entire album has been about lost friends, lovers, relationships, about feeling lost and alone and sad and angry and betrayed. Here at the end, time comes in track 9, greets someone who is old. Track 10 says that we should sleep now because we can fix everything in the morning. Light brings with it renewed vigor, or, I don't know, intelligence, clarity of mind. It's an interesting way to wrap this up, as I can see how it can pertain to the rest of the themes, but it also feels a bit out of left field. I do enjoy what at least seems to me, though, a bit of hope and optimism here for an album that primarily deals in depression, sorrow, and anger. These are my thoughts then on Zasypia, the 2025 album from Gorycz. Let me know what you thought of this. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on, do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? I asked quite a few questions throughout this, especially for lyrics stuff. I did check, by the way, I forgot to bring this up. Metal Archives has the Polish lyrics untranslated. If you're curious, want to help me out with some of my understanding, let me know. You can go over there and check those out. Above the comment section in the Discord, where's the button for this? I'm a bit too tired for this, I think. 3 hours of avant-garde black metal, and now I don't know how to work my little tablet thing. This thing, a link for Linktree in the description box. You can find links for my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. No, tomorrow's Sunday. I'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. EST, 3 p.m. UTC over on twitch.tv/criticalcomposer. I'm going to do a live stream as we do every Sunday, about 2.5 hours. We just check out some music, converse. There's good conversation, good people, good tunes. It is a very chill, relaxed way to, just have a couple hours on a Sunday. So if you can make it, I highly suggest you do. Otherwise, I'll have that up as soon as the stream's over. You can watch that pre-recorded whenever you want to. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as usual, for next week's reactions, which is going to be good. It's film score week. I'm super excited about this. All right, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.